They came to my barn at sunrise. 4 men in black shirts, letters shining across their chests. HOA. They carried clipboards like weapons, eyes sharp, voices cold. And then, one of them said the words that froze my blood. "We're here to seize your property." But what they didn't know, I was already 3 steps ahead. And before the day was done, they would regret ever stepping foot on my land. Welcome to HOA Stories. I'm Mark. I live on the edge of a quiet suburban neighborhood. By day, I work construction. But by night, I fight the battles no one else dares to fight. The battles against the HOA, the most dangerous army in suburbia. And this is the story of how 4 men tried to strip me of everything I owned. But instead, I flipped the script. I stood in the middle of my barn. The morning sun was spilling through the open doors, dust floating in the air like tiny sparks. And 4 men stood in front of me. Their shirts were black, letters in white. HOA. They stood like soldiers, but I knew they were not. One leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. Another scribbled on a clipboard like a judge. The third kept snapping photos of my saddles, my tools, my old rifles. And the last one, the one with the coldest eyes, stared straight at me. "By HOA command," he said, his voice sharp and flat. "We're here to seize your property." I didn't move. I didn't even blink, because inside I was boiling, but outside I stayed still. You see, my land is more than land. It's where I grew up. It's where my father taught me how to ride a horse. It's where my mother cooked meals for the whole neighborhood during summer fairs. Every inch of this barn, every nail in the wood, is a memory. And now these men, with fake power in their voices, wanted to take it away. I asked them why. The one with the clipboard spoke first. "You've been in violation for years," he said. "Your barn doors are not the apres of color. Your fencing doesn't meet regulation, and these weapons are a danger to the community." Weapons? They pointed at my grandfather's hunting rifle, mounted on the wall since before I was born, a rifle that never fired a shot on this land, a piece of history, turned into evidence against me. My chest tightened, but I didn't let them see it. Instead, I gave them a small smile, the kind of smile that hides more than it shows, because what they didn't know. I had been preparing for this day. For months they sent me letters, warnings covered in bold red ink, threats of fines, threats of liens, threats of taking my property. But I never threw those letters away. I kept them stacked neatly in a folder. I recorded every call, took pictures of every notice, and last month, I made a call of my own. I asked about HOA command. The woman on the phone laughed. "There's no such thing," she said. "An HOA can't seize property. They can't even enter without your consent." So as these men stepped deeper into my barn, pretending to be police, pretending to be military, I already knew the truth. And the truth was a weapon far sharper than theirs. The one rummaging through my duffel bag looked up at me. "These are unregistered items," he barked. He didn't even know what he was holding. Just tools, rope, gloves. But he said it like he was cracking a case on national TV. Another one snapped a photo of my boots by the door. My boots, covered in mud from last night's ride. "Non-compliant footwear," he whispered to his partner. They wrote it down like it was evidence of a crime. Non-compliant footwear. Can you believe that? I wanted to laugh. But instead I let silence grow, because silence makes men nervous, and nervous men make mistakes. The leader stepped forward. Tall, bald head shining under the light, jaw clenched tight. He stood close enough that I could smell his cologne, cheap and strong. The kind that earns the nose. "You have 2 choices," he said. "Sign this paper, or we take everything." He held out a folded document. The edges were already bent, like he'd been carrying it for weeks. I didn't even touch it. I just stared at his hand and slowly shook my head. "Not today," I whispered. His eyes twitched, just a little. But I saw it. For the first time, he wasn't in control. Behind my back, tucked into my vest, a small camera blinked red, recording every second, every word, every false claim. If they pushed harder, if they tried to take one more step, the world would see the truth. But I didn't show them the camera yet. Not yet, because timing is everything in war. And make no mistake, this was war, not with guns, but with rules, lies, and power. as I watched them scatter around my barn like rats searching for cheese. I thought of the neighborhood outside, the white fences, the trimmed lawns, the mailboxes standing tall in perfect rows, everything clean, perfect, quiet. But behind that quiet, there was fear. Fear of letters in the mailbox, fear of small men with big titles, fear of the HOA. And I realized something. If I didn't fight back now, if I didn't expose them for what they were, they wouldn't just come for me, they would come for everyone. The widow down the street with her roses planted an inch too wide, the single mom whose kids sometimes left bikes in the driveway, the old veteran who still raised his flag every morning even when they said it was too high. No, not today, not ever. I leaned against the barn wall, watching them, letting them believe they had control, because the higher they climbed, the harder the fall. And I was going to make sure they fell in front of the whole neighborhood. The question was simple now. Would I strike first, or would I let them make the next mistake? The air in my barn felt heavy, like a storm was pressing down on the roof. The 4 men kept moving, clipboards scratching, cameras flashing, each one of them acting like they owned the place. But I stood there, hands behind my back, eyes calm, because I already knew what they didn't. It wasn't alone in this fight. Behind that tiny blinking red light in my vest was proof. Proof that they weren't law. Proof that they weren't even following their own rules. Proof that the so-called HOA command was nothing more than a stage play, a bad play, acted out by desperate men. The tall one leaned in again, his jaw locked tight, his eyes trying to burn holes through me. "You don't want trouble," he said. "Sign the paper, pay the fines, and we'll leave you alone." Leave me alone? That's what they always said. That's what the letters promised. But each time I paid, another fee appeared. Each time I complied, another rule was created. There is no peace with men who feed on control. I glanced at the paper in his hand, rows of fake violations, fake numbers, non-compliant fencing, unauthorized storage, unregistered equipment. Even the font looked cheap, like it had been copied from an old template. He waited for me to reach for it, but my hands stayed locked behind my back. I said nothing, because silence makes men show who they really are, and that's when the smallest one lost it. He slammed his clipboard on my workbench. "You think this is a joke?" he shouted. "You think you can stand against the HOA command?" His voice cracked on the word command, and I almost laughed. But instead I tilted my head, watched him fume like a child denied candy. The tall one shot him a look, a silent warning. Then he turned back to me, his voice lower this time, sharper. "You have until the end of today," he said. "If you don't comply, we'll escalate." Escalate. That was the word they always used. It meant more letters, more threats, more harassment at my door. But this time, escalation would cut both ways. I took one step closer, close enough to see the sweat forming on his forehead, close enough that he had to tilt his chin up to meet my eyes, and in the calmest voice I could manage, I said, "Do what you need to do. But remember, so will I." For a moment, silence. Even the horses outside seemed to stop moving. The only sound was the faint hum of my camera, capturing every twitch in their faces. Then, they started backing out, one by one, still scribbling notes, still snapping pictures, but less certain than before. When the last one stepped past the barn doors, he turned back and barked, "This isn't over." And I smiled, because he was right. It wasn't over. It was just beginning. I waited until they were halfway across the yard before I followed, watched them pile into their shiny black SUV, the kind with tinted windows, trying to look official, but I noticed the dent on the bumper, the rust along the edge, and the way they sat inside, bickering like brothers instead of officers. Fake men, fake authority, fake command, as they drove off down the dirt path. I finally let myself breathe, but my hands were still shaking, because even when you know you're right, even when you hold the truth in your pocket, the fight takes something from you. I went back inside, closed the barn doors, and pulled the small camera from my vest. The screen lit up, clear video, clear sound, every lie recorded in perfect detail, and I knew exactly what I was going to do with it. That night, I sat at my old wooden desk, the same desk where my father used to pay bills by hand, letters from the HOA piled in the corner like trophies, and in front of me, my laptop screen glowing in the dark, I uploaded the footage. Every second, every word. I clipped their threats, their fake violations, their nonsense about unregistered footwear, and I saved it all because the neighborhood needed to see what I saw. But first, I made a call. Not to the county this time, not to the police. I called my neighbor, old Mr. Harris, a man who fought in wars long before this silly HOA battle ever began. He answered with his gravel voice. And when I told him what happened, he laughed for almost a full minute. "Son," he said, "I told you years ago, these people are nothing but theater actors with clipboards." And then he paused. "But you've got to him now. Don't waste it. Don't waste it." Those words stuck with me because the truth is, most of my neighbors live in fear. They pay fines they can't afford. They repaint fences that don't need paint. They bow their heads and say, "Yes, ma'am," and "Yes, sir" to people who have no real power. And I realized, if I released this footage, if I exposed them, I wouldn't just be fighting for me, I'd be fighting for everyone. The widow with her roses, the single mom with the bikes, the veteran with his flag, all of them. So I made another call, this time to a local reporter, a young woman who covered small-town corruption stories. She picked up on the second ring. I introduced myself, told her where I lived, what I had, and when I finished. There was silence on the line. Then she whispered, "Send it to me. Right now." My hands shook as I hit send because once it left my computer, there was no going back. The truth would spread, the fake command would be exposed, and I would either be the man who saved the neighborhood or the man who made himself the biggest target. The email went through, and I leaned back in my chair, staring at the folder of letters, the folder of fines, the folder of lies, and I knew one thing for sure. This war had only just started. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw their faces. Those fake soldiers in black shirts, stomping through my barn like they owned it. But this time I also saw something else. The blinking light of my camera. The proof I sent to the reporter. My phone buzzed on the table. I grabbed it fast. It was a message. A single line from the reporter. "We're running the story tonight." My chest tightened. For weeks I carried the weight alone. The threats, the letters, the games. Now the whole town would see it. I walked outside and leaned on my porch rail. The neighborhood was quiet. Sprinklers hissed across perfect lawns. The air smelled like cut grass and cheap fertilizer. All of it. The fake peace of suburbia. But peace was about to crack. I knew by the end of the day, everyone on this street would know what happened in my barn, and the HOA command would have nowhere to hide. By noon, the phone calls started. Not from the HOA, from my neighbors. Mrs. Cole down the street called first. Her voice shook as she said, "I knew it wasn't just me. I knew they were lying." She told me about the time they fined her for hanging laundry outside. They said it damaged the community image. She paid the fine, but she never forgot. Then the single mom, Rachel, showed up at my porch, her son's bike in the back of her car. She said the HOA once threatened to tow it away because he left it by the mailbox overnight. She looked tired, her eyes red from years of stress. "Thank you," she whispered. Finally, someone stood up to them. By 3 o'clock, I realized something. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It was everyone's. The story spread fast. Neighbors passing it house to house, phones buzzing, screens lighting up with the video, people whispering, then shouting. The fake command wasn't a secret anymore. And then, the SUV showed up, the same black one, same dent on the bumper, same tinted windows trying to look official. It rolled up slow, tires crunching gravel, and stopped right in front of my gate. The tall one stepped out first, his bald head shining in the hot sun. The others followed, faces red with anger. They didn't look like soldiers anymore. They looked like cornered animals. He shouted across the yard, "You made a mistake." His voice echoed against the barn walls, but I didn't move. I just leaned on the fence, calm, steady, waiting. He stormed closer, paper in hand again. "You think the news can protect you?" he barked. "You think your neighbors will save you?" His voice cracked at the end. The calm was gone now. I let him rant. Because the more he spoke, the weaker he looked, And then I said it, the words I had been saving. "You don't scare me anymore." For a moment, silence. The other three shifted on their feet, eyes darting. They knew the truth now. Everyone did. That's when he tried one last move. He waved the paper at me. "This is a lien notice," he yelled. "If you don't comply, we'll take your land through the courts." I smiled, slow and steady, because last night I had already checked. There was no lien, no record, no legal power at all. I pulled my phone from my pocket, held it up high so the camera caught his face, and I said, "Say that again." He froze. The sweat rolled down his temple, and in that second, the soldier mask fell off completely. He wasn't command. He wasn't law. He was just a neighbor with a cheap shirt and a thirst for control. The others started pulling him back. One of them whispered, "It's over, man. Let it go." But he pushed their hands away. His pride wouldn't let him stop. "You'll regret this," he shouted as they dragged him toward the SUV. "You'll regret the day you crossed the HOA command." The SUV roared to life and rolled away, this time faster, angrier, dust rising behind it like smoke from a fire. And I stood there, alone again, but not really alone, because across the street, I saw curtains move, faces peeking out, neighbors watching, for the first time, not with fear, with hope. That evening the reporter called. Her voice was full of energy. "The video went viral," she said. "Thousands of views in hours. People all over the state are sharing it." I asked her what would happen next. She laughed softly and said, "Now the county has to act. Now the HOA command has to answer." I hung up and sat on my porch as the sun went down. The sky turned orange over the rooftops. Kids rode their bikes down the street, shouting and laughing, for once. Nobody cared if the tires touched the sidewalk line. It felt like freedom, real freedom, the kind you taste after years of swallowing fear. But deep inside, I knew it wasn't finished. The All One wasn't the type to walk away quietly. He would come back, and when he did, it would be worse. Still, for the first time in years, I felt ready. Because I wasn't just one man against an army anymore. The neighborhood had woken up, the masks had fallen, and the fight had only begun. The next morning, I heard a sound I never expected on my street. Not sprinklers, not lawnmowers, not barking dogs. It was the sound of county trucks. 2 white pickups rolled in with the county seal stamped on the doors, behind them a sedan. And out stepped 3 officials in button-up shirts with clipboards of their own. But these weren't cheap boards with fake stamps. These were real county inspectors. The kind that carried weight. Neighbors gathered fast. They spilled onto their lawns like ants from a hill, whispers running from porch to porch. The HOA command was about to be exposed in broad daylight. I stood at my gate as the inspectors walked up. One of them smiled politely and said, "Sir, we're here in response to a complaint and to review the claims made by the HOA command." He said the word command with air quotes, like he already knew it was a joke. I nodded and opened the barn doors wide. "Come on in," I said. "See for yourselves." Inside, the morning light spilled across the saddles, the tools, the rifles on the wall, the same things the fake command called illegal. The inspectors took notes, measured fences, checked doors, and one by one, they shook their heads. Finally, the lead inspector turned to me. "None of this violates county code," he said. "You're within your rights." My neighbors gasped, some clapped, and for the first time in years, I felt the weight lift off my chest. But the moment of peace didn't last long, because just as the inspectors were packing up, the black SUV rolled in again. The tall one jumped out first, red-faced, eyes blazing. The other 3 trailed behind him like shadows that had lost their strength. He stormed right up to the inspectors. "What are you doing here?" he snapped. "This is HOA command business. You have no authority here." The inspector calmly showed his badge. "Actually, sir, we have all the authority here." For a second, the tall one froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The neighbors leaned in closer. The silence was heavy, sweet. Then he exploded. "You think this changes anything?" he shouted. "This land, this neighborhood, belongs to us." The words hung in the air. Belongs to us, not represents, not manages, belongs. And just like that, the mask fell off completely. The inspector's pen stopped. He looked the tall man dead in the eye and said, "Sir, you're under investigation for fraud and harassment." The crowd gasped. Phones shot up in the air. Everyone was recording now. The bullies who once hid behind letters and fake titles were finally exposed. But the tall one wasn't done yet. He shoved past the inspector and pointed at me. "You did this!" he screamed. "You turned them against us!" His face twisted like a man drowning, desperate, furious, broken. And in that moment I realized something. This wasn't about fences or paint or rifles. It was about control. And control was slipping through his fingers. The inspectors called for backup. A real sheriff's car rolled in minutes later. The blue lights cut through the sunny street, and the neighbors cheered like it was the 4th of July. The sheriff walked straight to the tall one, calm, steady, no fear in his step. "Sir, I'm going to need you to leave the premises," he said, "or you'll be charged with trespassing." The tall one shook with rage, but his words failed him now. The SUV doors slammed, the engine roared, and they drove off faster than ever before. For a moment, it felt like victory. The neighborhood clapped, hands patted my back. Even kids shouted my name like I was some kind of hero. But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. Men like him don't walk away quietly. They don't forgive. They don't forget. They plan. They wait. And then, they strike harder. That night, the victory party turned into whispers. Neighbors shared stories of years of harassment. One man said the HOA once fined him for having his curtains too dark. Another said they threatened to evict his dog because it barked during the day. Every story added fuel to the fire, and every story painted the same picture. The HOA command wasn't just petty, it was rotten to the core. I sat at the edge of the porch while the stories poured out. The stars overhead seemed brighter than usual. Maybe it was hope, maybe it was relief. But even as I listened, I felt a shadow crawling in my chest, because I knew the tall one, and I knew his pride. He would be back, not with letters, not with fake papers, but with something darker. Sure enough, 2 nights later, it happened. I woke to the sound of tires crunching gravel, slow, deliberate, like a predator circling prey. I peered through the blinds, and there it was. The black SUV, parked at the edge of my property, engine running, lights off. I grabbed my phone, started recording, but the car didn't move. It just sat there, waiting. Minutes passed, then an hour. Finally, it drove away. No words, no actions, just silence. But silence can be louder than threats, because silence says, "We're not done yet." I hardly slept the rest of the night. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps. Every gust of wind sounded like a door opening. And by morning, my nerves were shredded. I walked outside to find something new. A letter, taped to my gate. No envelope, no stamp, just 4 words in thick black ink. "This isn't over." I stared at the paper, my fists clenched, my chest pounding. The victory we won felt like it was already fading, because the war wasn't finished. Not yet. The letter stayed on my gate for hours. I didn't touch it at first. I just stared at the thick black ink. 4 words that felt heavier than 100 fines. "This isn't over." The wind tugged at the edges of the paper, but the tape held firm, like the words wanted to stay, wanted to haunt me. I finally ripped it down and held it in my hand. The paper was rough, cheap, but to it. His message cut deep, because it wasn't just a warning, it was a promise. The rest of that day dragged by slow. Neighbors stopped me on the street. They whispered about the SUV parked at night. They whispered about the letter. Fear spread like a sickness. Even though the county had stepped in, even though the truth was out, the shadow of the HOA command still lingered. That night, it got worse. I was sitting in my living room, lights off, just the glow of the TV flickering on the walls, when I heard it, a faint knock at the back door, slow, deliberate. I froze. No one used the back door, not even friends. The knock came again, and then a voice, low and mocking. "Still think you're safe?" I didn't answer. I didn't move. I just reached for the camera sitting on the coffee table and hit record. The voice chuckled. Footsteps scraped across the porch, and then silence. I waited 10 long minutes before I opened the door. Nothing, no one, just a rock sitting on the step, and under it, another piece of paper. This time the message was shorter. 1 word in black ink, soon. I clenched the paper in my fist, my jaw tight, because this wasn't about rules anymore. This wasn't about grass length or barn doors. This was war, psychological war. The next morning I found out I wasn't the only one. Mrs. Cole discovered footprints in her garden, perfect circles stamped into her rose beds. Rachel found her trash can tipped over and her car keyed, and old Mr. Harris told me someone slid an envelope under his door. Inside was nothing but a photo of his house, taken in the middle of the night. The whole neighborhood was under siege. Fear grew thicker with every hour. Some neighbors stayed inside, curtains closed, lights off. Others gathered in small groups, whispering, glancing over their shoulders. Everyone knew it was the tall one and his crew, but no one wanted to say his name out loud, like saying it might make him appear. Me? I refused to bow, but inside, I felt the weight, the sleepless nights, the tension in my chest, the fear for my land, for my neighbors, for myself. I knew I needed to act, not with fists, not with guns, but with strategy. So I started planning. First, cameras. I bought every camera I could afford, mounted them on the barn, the porch, even the fence posts, red lights blinking in the night like watchful eyes. Second, alliances. I went door to door, talking to neighbors, not whispering, not hiding. I told them we couldn't fight alone. We had to fight together. Some hesitated, some shook their heads, too scared, but others nodded, eyes burning with the same anger I felt by the end of the week. Half the neighborhood was on my side, half ready to resist. Third, evidence. I kept recording every noise, every car that passed too slow, every shadow that lingered too long. I built a folder thicker than the HOA's fake fines. And I knew, when the time came, I would use it. But the tall one struck first. It was a Friday night, the air thick with summer heat. I sat on the porch sipping coffee when the SUV rolled in slow. It stopped right in the middle of the street. Doors swung open, and out they came. 4 men again, black shirts, cold eyes. But this time, they weren't holding clipboards. They carried flashlights and chains. They didn't speak. They didn't knock. They walked straight to my fence and started wrapping the chains around it. Clinking metal echoing through the quiet street. Neighbors peeked from windows, phones in their hands, but no one stepped outside. I stood up, my heart pounding. "What do you think you're doing?" I shouted. The tall one smirked. "Securing what's ours." He tugged the chain tight, locked it with a heavy padlock. Then he pointed his flashlight at me. "You want a war? You've got one." For a moment, I thought about charging him, my fists clenched, my blood burning, but I stopped myself because I wasn't going to win with fists. I was going to win with proof. So I raised my phone, camera flashing in the dark, recording every second. The tall one sneered, "Go ahead, record. No one will believe you." But he was wrong, because this time, the whole neighborhood was watching. Curtains shifted, cameras glowed in windows. The whispering had ended, the fear was breaking. And in that moment, I realized the HOA command wasn't strong anymore. They were desperate, and desperate men make mistakes. The 4 of them finished chaining the fence. Then they climbed back into the SUV, engine roaring, tires screeching, dust clouding the street. When they were gone, I walked to the gate. The chain gleamed under the porch light. Thick, heavy, cold, but I smiled, because they had just given me exactly what I needed. Proof, unshakable proof, that they weren't protectors, they were invaders. That night, I uploaded the video, not just to the reporter, but to the world. I posted it everywhere. Neighbors shared it. Strangers shared it. By morning, it had spread across the state. The HOA command wasn't just a local problem anymore. It was a story, and stories can't be silenced. But still, as the sun rose, and my phone buzzed with messages of support, I knew it wasn't over. The tall one wasn't finished, and the next move would be his most dangerous yet. The chain stayed on my gate for 3 days. Neighbors came by, offering cutters, offering help. But I told them no, not yet, because that chain wasn't just metal. It was proof, and proof is more powerful than any weapon. On the 4th morning, the HOA board called a meeting. Every homeowner was invited, and for the first time in years, everyone showed up. The hall was packed, chairs scraping, whispers buzzing, the smell of coffee and sweat thick in the air. And at the front of the room, there he was, the tall one, standing like a general before an army. Beside him sat the rest of the board, 3 women and 2 men, all with stiff faces and nervous eyes. I knew most of them. Neighbors I once waved to on summer evenings, but now they looked like soldiers behind their captain. The tall one slammed his hand on the podium. "This neighborhood is under attack," he declared, "by lies, by betrayal, by those who want to destroy everything we've built." His eyes locked on me. The crowd turned. Some whispers grew louder, some heads shook, but I stood tall, arms crossed, waiting. He raised a thick binder. "This," he shouted, "is every violation, every infraction, every danger this man has brought to our community." He flipped pages fast. Grass too tall, fence too wide, boots too dirty. It was the same nonsense as before, but now he spoke it like gospel. The crowd shifted uneasily. Some people frowned, some nodded. Fear is a powerful drug, and he was serving it in heavy doses. Then he leaned forward, his voice dropping low. "He wants to make us look weak. He wants the county, the press, even the world, to laugh at us. But I promise you this, we are not weak, we are command." The crowd erupted in murmurs. Some clapped, some booed. The division split the room in two. I let him finish. I let him build his little empire of fear, and then I stepped forward. "Command," I said. My voice carried through the hall. "Command doesn't chain gates in the middle of the night. Command doesn't sneak notes under doors. Command doesn't terrorize the very people it claims to protect." The crowd hushed. All eyes swung to me. I pulled out my phone, tapped play, and the screen behind the podium lit up with video. The SUV, the chains, the tall one's smirk in the dark. Gasps filled the room, mouths dropped, the board members stiffened, and the tall one's face went pale. "This," I said, "is not protection. This is not leadership. This is fraud. This is harassment. This is control." The silence was thick as smoke. Then a voice rose from the back. Mrs. Cole, her small frame shaking but her voice clear. "He fined me for hanging laundry." Another voice, Rachel. "They threatened to take my son's bike." Then more. One by one the neighbors stood, sharing stories, shouting truths. The room turned into a storm, and for the first time, the tall one looked trapped. But pride is poison. He didn't back down. He slammed the binder shut and shouted over the noise. "Lies. All lies. This man has poisoned you." He pointed at me like I was a criminal on trial. "He's destroying this community. He's destroying our power." And then it hit me. He said the word our, not your, not the board's, our. This wasn't about the HOA anymore. It was about him, his ego, his need to control every inch of this neighborhood. The board shifted nervously in their seats. Their eyes darted from him to me to the crowd. They were cracking. They knew it. He knew it. And I knew it. The meeting ended in chaos. Shouts, accusations. Neighbors pushing out into the parking lot with red faces and shaking fists. The tall one stormed out the back door, his SUV roaring away like thunder. But the war wasn't finished, because the next morning, new signs appeared all over the neighborhood, red letters stapled to every fence and mailbox. Community under command. The board was his now. He had turned them into his private army, and the signs were his flag. Neighbors ripped some down, others left them up in fear. The division deepened. Half the street with me, half with him. That night, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number, a single line. "You've started something you can't control." I stared at the screen, and for the first time, I felt it. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was war on a bigger scale, and I couldn't fight it alone. So I called Mr. Harris, the old veteran. His gravel voice came through the line. "I've been waiting for this," he said. "I'll gather the others." The next evening, we met in my barn. 10 neighbors, some old, some young, some scared, but all tired of bowing. We talked late into the night. We planned. We organized. We weren't just going to defend ourselves. We were going to take back the neighborhood. The tall one thought he could turn the board into his army. But he forgot something important. The power was never his. The power was ours. Always ours. I looked at the faces in the barn, the fire in their eyes, the unity I hadn't seen in years, and I knew the end was coming. One way or another, the question was simple now. Who would break first? The night before, it all ended. I didn't sleep. The barn was quiet. The house was quiet. But my head wasn't. I kept hearing his voice in my mind. The tall one. We are command. We'll take what's ours. You've started something you can't control. His words echoed like footsteps in a long hallway, but under them, I also heard something else. The voices of my neighbors, Mrs. Cole whispering about her roses, Rachel crying about her son's bike, Mr. Harris with his gravel laugh saying, "Don't waste it." And I knew tomorrow would decide everything. The morning came with heat, heavy heat that made the air thick, like the world itself was holding its breath. I walked outside and saw the signs still stapled everywhere. Community under command. The red letters glared like bloodstains against white fences. Some neighbors had ripped theirs down. Others hadn't dared. The division was clear as day. Then I heard it. Engines. Loud. Multiple. I stepped into the street just as 3 SUVs rolled in. All black. All with tinted windows. They stopped in the middle of the road like tanks in formation. The tall one stepped out first, his jaw tight, his eyes burning. Behind him spilled the rest of the board. And behind them, men I didn't even recognize, all wearing the same black shirts with the same bold letters. HOA command. They weren't hiding anymore. They wanted a show. Neighbors came out of their houses. Some stood on porches. Some gathered on lawns. Phones lifted, eyes wide. Everyone knew. This was. The tall one raised a megaphone. His voice boomed through the neighborhood. "This man has betrayed us. This man has poisoned our community. And today, we take back what is ours." He pointed straight at me, his fingers shaking with rage. The black shirts behind him roared like a crowd at a game, but their voices cracked. Because they weren't an army, they were just scared men trying to sound strong. I took a step forward. No megaphone, no army, just my voice. "This is not yours. This never was yours. This is our neighborhood, and we're done bowing to you." The street fell silent. Every camera was on me now, every phone recording. I raised my hand and snapped my fingers, and from behind me, my neighbors stepped forward. Mr. Harris first, his cane tapping against the road, then Rachel with her son at her side, then Mrs. Cole clutching her folder of fines. One by one they lined up beside me. 10, then 20, then 30, half the street standing shoulder to shoulder. The tall one laughed, a bitter, broken laugh. "You think this matters?" he barked. "You think numbers make you right?" I pulled my phone from my pocket, tapped the screen, and the projector I had hidden in the barn flicked on. The garage wall behind me lit up with video, the chain on my gate, the SUV in the dark, the tall one's face sneering in the flashlight, all of it. Clear as day, gasps echoed. The board members shifted uneasily. The crowd murmured louder. The black shirts looked at each other, some lowering their eyes. I stepped closer. "You built your command on fear, but fear falls when the truth stands tall." The tall one's face turned red. He ripped the megaphone from his lips and hurled it at the ground. "You'll regret this," he screamed. "You'll all regret this." But his voice cracked, and for the first time, no one believed him. The sheriff's car rolled in then, blue lights flashing, doors swung open. 2 deputies stepped out calm and steady. The lead inspector from the county followed behind them, clipboard in hand. He pointed at the tall one and said, "There's your fraud. There's your harassment. Take him in." The deputies moved fast. The tall one tried to resist, but his own men didn't help him. They stepped back, some even turned away, and in seconds, the man who once called himself Command was in handcuffs. The crowd erupted. Cheers, clapping, neighbors hugging each other with relief. The board members scattered like leaves in the wind, their power broken, their masks gone. I stood still in the middle of the street, watching as the SUV doors slammed shut, watching as the tall one was driven away. His face pressed against the glass, still spitting words no one could hear anymore. And then, it was quiet again. The kind of quiet I hadn't felt in years. A real quiet. A free quiet. Neighbors came to me one by one, thanking me, shaking my hand, patting my back. But I told them the truth. This wasn't me. This was us, together. That night. The signs came down. Every last one. Staples pulled out. Wood cleaned. The red letters burned in a barrel behind my barn. The neighborhood finally felt like a neighborhood again. Kids laughing on bikes. Dogs barking without fear of fines. Curtains open wide without worry of judgment. I sat on my porch as the stars filled the sky. The air was cool. The crickets sang, and for the first time, I let myself breathe. The war was over, but the memory stayed. The letters, the chains, the threats in the dark, and one man's hunger for control. It made me realize something important. The real enemy in suburbia isn't grass length or mailbox height. It's pride. It's fear. It's neighbors forgetting their neighbors. We remembered, and because we remembered, we won. So now I ask you, if a man in your neighborhood tried to build his own army, tried to control your street with fear and lies, would you stand in the shadows, hoping it passed, or would you step into the light with your neighbors and flip the script once and for all?